Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 28th of September 2021. These are the stories that will be under discussion during the course of the show. We will begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the plight of the Indian farmers as far as India is concerned. We know that a year has passed since the farmers have been protesting against the rules that have been put forward by the Indian government that they say, that the farmer community says, is against the farmer community. It will put them into jeopardy and will put their future as a community also into jeopardy. They have been protesting now since 1 year. Despite of that, no outcome has come out. There have been talks between the Indian government and the farmers community, but no tangible outcome has come out. At the same time, we also know the way in the Indian government has been treating its different minorities, and also the different names that have been called to these farmers while they were protesting and while they still protest. This is going to be our leading segment. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go to our second segment, and that concerns the situation in Afghanistan. Our Prime Minister wrote an opinion piece in the Washington Post that came out yesterday. He said that Pakistan must not be blamed for the outcome of the war in Afghanistan and for the losses of the United States. And he said that any further conflict needs to be avoided, whether it be a humanitarian conflict or any other conflict, and there should be no blame game. Now, this is not the first time that there has been a blame game from the powers that be on Pakistan. Nevertheless, the piece that has been written by Imran Khan is a very important one, because he highlights the very important points that need to be ascertained and that need to be thought about by the powers that be, especially the United States and the United Nations, in the whole context of Afghanistan and now the current government of the Afghan Taliban. So let's begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the first story that concerns the plight of the farmers community in India. And now it has been a year that they have been protesting against what they say are laws and regulations that have been put forward by the Indian government that are against their community. More in the following report.
A Hindutva BJP regime is desperate to paint progressive portrayal of India at the ongoing UN General Assembly sessions. The country has been jolted once again by world's largest protest against draconian measures of autocratic regime. Indian farmers are staging earth-shattering protests to repeal legislation of BJP government cloaked under veneer of agriculture reforms. The farmers have relaunched massive protests with renewed vigour, along with calls for nationwide strike on the anniversary of last year's controversial legislation passage. Until recently, the indifferent Modi government has refused to pay heed to the demands of poor farmers and agricultural unions, and instead tried to crush peaceful democratic protests with brute force. Indian police, armed with tear gas, batons and assault rifles, is inflicting atrocities upon its own peacefully protesting civilians at the behest of tyrant Indian government. It is pertinent to mention here that Indian farmers' protest earned global attention owing to police brutality, subsequent suppression of the press by the government, and internet cuts and shutdowns in areas surrounding protests, which led to activists like Rihanna, Greta Thunberg and Amina using their social media accounts to call global attention towards the plight of poor Indian farmers. India has witnessed record number of farmer suicide, and there is increased fear that these exploitative new bills will further drive this suicide epidemic.
Now, to talk more about this plight of the farmers community in India, we've been joined by Hamid Khan al-Mashriqi, a renowned analyst. Hamid, thank you very much to have joined us. A year has now passed by since the farmers started their agitation against these laws that have been brought forward by the Indian government. Why has the Indian government not budged an inch despite a year having passed by?
Thank you very much, Omar. Actually, I should say that we should call it not, reforms. They are illegal reforms. Because since these reforms have been introduced, all the legislative experts in India, they've been keep saying that the way BJP government bulldozed the system of bringing the legislation or reforms in Lok Sabha, it has not been even followed the proper procedure for that. Then we have seen one more thing which we have not mentioned in our today's discussion is how many farmers have been killed due to these protests. It's over 600 are official figure who have lost their lives within last 1 year because of the protests and because of the atrocities by Indian police and the security agencies. So I mean, this matter is, as Balbir Singh, one of the heads of this movement, has clearly said that this is a matter of life and death for the farmers of India. But because BJP's Hindutva ideology is making it a religious matter, making it a
Now,
matter
Hamid,
of
tell me one
minorities.
thing. We know that the Modi government is anti-minority, especially anti-Muslim. Has it also become anti-farmer, as a lot of people from the farmers community are saying?
Yeah, it is. It has become anti-farmer because it is supporting the corporate and elite class of the Indian businessmen. It is not helping any way out to the farmers. We have seen it despite of their protest, despite of being many promises to them within last 1 year, where they were saying, oh, they have managed to control the farmers and everything. There was not a single day, Umar, that this protest is stopped or slower anyway. Yes, there was a media blackout against these about these protests. But as far as the situation is concerned, farmers are committed from the day one to forcefully get this Indian fascist government to take these amendments off, and they are committed to get it done by force, because BJP government is trying to bulldoze the rights of farmers, of rights of living. Because
If
if
the
if
Indian
you
government continues to bulldoze the rights of the farmers community, as you have just pointed out, what's going to be the future of this huge majority? I've talked to many people that represent the
exactly
farmers community in India in my previous shows, and they have said that it's not a minority, it's a majority
no
community
yes
of India, and
yes
they should not take us lightly. What will happen if India continues to take them lightly?
I'll tell you the two reasons why they are taking it lightly. Because in the beginning, some of the political parties were supporting the farmers movement, and then some of them, they pointed out that we don't want to make it a political movement or anything. So only the farmers unions or the associations, they took over the protest. And BJP is thinking that because it does not have a political support, they may be able to control it. But let me remind you that now, and after 3 to 4 months, it's going to be elections in Punjab. And if I can tell you one thing, the way BJP government is handling it, the way Congress is doing it, it's going to be, there going to be another force as well. A political force is going to emerge from these farmers. And then BJP is going to pay the price for that politically. Secondly,
All right, but
if they think
Hamid,
that,
you remember when they came, then they were about to go in the second elections, the BJP
yeah,
government. We already talked about the future of the BJP government. At that time, also there were a lot of question marks as far as their actions were concerned. Despite that, the BJP government came back with the majority. Now, you talk about these elections that are going to be held in Punjab. Do you really feel there's going to be an effect? Because it seems as if the majority of Hindus have been swayed by the so-called power mechanism of the BJP and the RSS government.
I'll tell you, if you look into the recent results of Bihar, if you look into how much in trouble BJP in Uttar Pradesh, if you look into how much in trouble they are in Bengal, I will tell you one thing, that the BJP and especially Modi is losing its popularity every day, no matter whatever he is doing now. But there is no doubt that the Hindutva ideology, RSS ideology vote is always there, blindly following him, fascist ideology of Modi. But in Punjab, I will tell you, the BJP will suffer heavily because of one of these reforms. Secondly, Navjot Singh Sindhu has taken over the Punjab Congress, and he is a very prominent candidate for the next chief ministership of Punjab.
All right, now you've talked of Sidhu. I'd also like to talk about the Congress party and the other parties that are in the opposition. Do you feel if the Indian current government continues to pressurize the minorities, whether it be the Muslims or whether it be the Sikhs or whether it be the farmers community, that the next polls will not be in their favor? Or do you feel that it's going to continue the way it is because of the fact that there is a certain mindset that has been impregnated in the mindset of all the Hindu community in India?
Yeah. Actually, Umar, prior to 2010, 2012, the Indian was known as so-called secular country. But since 2014, Modi has entirely changed the country's identity as a Hindu state. So there is no doubt that, there will be still a lot of support for the Modi, but it will give a big jolt to him in coming elections. And in some of the states like Punjab, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and then Bengal, and then these are the states where BJP is going to suffer heavy damages. And one more thing I would like to say, that these farmers are very clear that they are not going to budge for anything less than taking the entire bill off.
All right, thank you very much, Hamid Khan Al-Mashriqi, to have joined us and to have talked to us about this very important issue that plagues our neighborhood country, that is that of India, whether it be what is happening in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, whether what is happening with the minorities within India, especially with the Muslims, and now what is happening with the farmers community since now a year. India slowly and steadily going down what we say the non-democratic drain. And let's move over now to our second segment, and that concerns Afghanistan, the latest situation there, and of course our Prime Minister Imran Khan, who has written an opinion piece in the Washington Post regarding the situation in Afghanistan and how pertinent it is for the world community to stand by Afghanistan's side. More in the following report.
The uncertain situation of war-ravaged Afghanistan presents one of the most taxing geopolitical dilemma to not only the region but also global actors. Pakistan has always pursued pragmatic Afghan policy because Islamabad has always strived for stability and peaceful political setup in its western neighbor for the sake of economic rejuvenation of entire region. Islamabad's incessant diplomatic offensive and unwavering assistance to bring Taliban to the negotiating table, its efforts to ensure smooth departure of US and allied forces, and relentless cooperation in evacuation operation affirm its role of honest broker in the Afghan gambit. The sudden US abandonment of Afghanistan posed challenges for Islamabad owing to vivid prospects of Afghan war spilling instability in Pakistan. Instead of acknowledging Pakistan's tireless efforts to manage Afghan morass, the world unfortunately is embroiled in blame game to hold the country responsible for their own dreadful Afghan policy. Urging the futility of the blame game, Premier Imran Khan has categorically stated that Pakistan must not be blamed for the outcome of the war in Afghanistan and for the losses of the United States, while urging the world to focus on developing challenges in the country. Deciphering his understanding of Afghanistan's situation in an op-ed for the Washington Post, Prime Minister Khan emphasized that Pakistan surely could not be blamed for the fact that 300,000 plus well-trained and equipped Afghan security forces saw no reason to fight the lightly armed Taliban. During his United Nations General Assembly debut, Prime Minister Imran Khan pressed the international community to strengthen and stabilize the current Afghan government for sake of the Afghan people. Afghan endgame has already enhanced Pakistan's importance, and Islamabad is viewed as the key to Kabul. Hence, the world needs to circumvent propensity to blame Pakistan for their own strategic blunders.
I will talk more about the latest situation in Afghanistan with reference to the opinion poll, or piece in fact rather, of our Prime Minister Imran Khan in the Washington Post. We've been joined by Dr. Amina Mehmood. She's a foreign affairs expert. Dr. Saiba, pleasure to have you in our studios as always. Dr. Saiba, our Prime Minister talked to the United Nations General Assembly. Then this opinion piece came out in the Washington Post. Both things say more or less the same things. Afghanistan needs world support. Does the world want to support Afghanistan?
Omar, that is clear depiction of Pakistan's continuity of foreign policy that we have been saying. Even Prime Minister mentioned in his piece of writing as well as in UNGA that since 2001 Prime Minister was asserting that this war would be useless and there would be no solution except negotiation, and war is not the solution. And you see that after 21 years we see the same. And that is continuity of Pakistan's foreign policy, that we should negotiate peace in Afghanistan, and that should be intra-Afghan and Afghan-led solution.
Of course.
And that is the reality. You have seen that now Afghans have matured to the level that Afghan army and no group fought with each other, and Taliban won single-handedly within few days, and it was drastic for the whole Western world, who were expecting that they have trained a big Afghan army, equipped them with the best weapons, and they were not able to fight. Rather, they don't have the will to fight because they knew that they are not the capacity.
But the US had a lot of expectations before all of this happened from the
all
Afghan
the Western
forces.
world, all the Western world, they were having this expectation that they are not trained militarily only, they are trained ideologically even, and they would be in the support of West. And the results showed that Afghans are having a distinct culture, distinct thought, ideas, and they are representing a distinct civilization.
Is it a clash of ideology between the West and the Afghan people?
if you say that clash of ideology, that is actually the Western concept. You see the Fukuyama's clash of civilization, that there would be
But
Islam.
I'm just trying to ask you whether it is because of this clash that the West is not sending out as much of aid as it should, given the current situation that is happening in Afghanistan.
Since aid is not on their, aid is not their priority. You see that they have
There is
been
some loosening by the US, but not as much as it should be.
They stayed here as the occupation force. They spent on military solution, so they did not spend on development. If US was would have been spending on development of the people, there must be some change in favor of Western alliance. But it was not there, because they were spending on military, on police, and they were not spending on the welfare of the people.
290 million US dollars every day was spent by the US for 20 years period. Just do the maths.
And you see the ratio of the people, population. So this spending, if half of it had been spent on development of the people, they could have bring a change. In rest of the world, they are working on the education and development and empowerment of people, etc. But here they spent only on Afghan forces. They collapsed within few days because they were not ideologically motivated according to the Western ideologies.
Dr. Saiba, when we talk of Western ideologies and the Afghan ideology and the Afghan mode of governance, our Prime Minister said in his op-ed piece that he had repeatedly warned since 2001 that the Afghan war was unwinnable, and that given their history, the Afghans would never accept a protracted foreign military presence. 20 years down the lane, this is what the US or the West has gone with. Why didn't it understand in the last 20 years? I mean, it wasn't something that was very difficult to comprehend, was it?
But if you see the patterns of American foreign policy, they made a policy, as I just mentioned, that in 1993 there was a clash of civilization thesis presented, and then they started thinking on the line, and they staged to 9/11. And now there are evidences that 9/11 was not real. So they staged that, and they started for fighting a war against so-called fundamental Islam and Al-Qaeda and so. And they don't think over there, they don't review their foreign policy unless 20 years are passed. You see that on the same ground they attacked on Iraq, and they entered into Syria, they fought in Libya, and they wanted to make Muslim lands as an example because they wanted to finish them, and they wanted to establish their hegemony. Americans were after their hegemony. They wanted to establish their hegemony because they thought that now there would be no clash of civilization, and Muslim world along with China would not be able to counter them, while the real situation was vice versa. China took this time to develop as an economic power, and that is unchallengeable power right now.
True.
And they have developed their soft power all across the world, Africa, Asia. Now they are entering in Europe, and they have
also forging close ties with the Afghans.
Exactly. It is part of their agenda that they want to have first regional development and then lead to world development, global development, and they are successful. While US is retreating power or status quo power at this time, and they want to defend their position that they are still superpower.
All right. Now, Dr. Saiba, our premier also said in the op-ed piece that for the locals in Afghanistan, the US was an occupier of Afghanistan, just like the Soviets, deserving of the same treatment. And he said that Pakistan also, because of that, was found guilty and attacked as a consequence of all of that.
Because we were the frontline state. You see that President Musharraf's policy, which Prime Minister mentioned, it was as a frontline state, and we abandoned the groups which were the partner of US and Pakistan in defeating Soviet Union. And when you abandon your partners, you were having no bonding inside Afghanistan. So they took Pakistan and US as the monolithic. They thought that they are the same.
Right.
And since we were providing all logistic support to this war on terror, and without Pakistan they could not fight.
This famous mantra of doing more, that is time and again said by the US and imposed on
It's
Pakistan.
still going on.
It still is going on. Seeing the current change in regional and global dynamics, how should Pakistan move forward?
I think that Pakistan is moving in the right direction. When when Prime Minister say that is absolute no, it means that we are not going to surrender our own interest in favor of US demands. We have determined our own interest, and that is actually the regional peace and regional security, and having good relation with our all neighborly countries, especially the Afghanistan, because we are having major stakes in peace in Afghanistan. So since we have adopted the right direction, that Pakistani national interest may be different from US, and US should honor that. That is, it means that we are not going to listen anything like do more. Rather, we want to have a geo-economic cooperation, that if you come for the trade, for investment, for economic development, you are most welcome. That is Pakistan's foreign policy.
That is true. Let's also talk about the current status of relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan. As per the op-ed piece by our Premier, he said that in order to satisfy Kabul, Pakistan offered a joint border visibility mechanism, suggested biometric border controls, advocated fencing the border and other measures, and each idea, he said, was rejected, and noted that Pakistan had now fenced the border largely on its own. Do you feel that Afghanistan has now come to terms with the measures that Pakistan has taken?
Obviously, there is no option, but these all offers which Pakistan gave to United States and NATO alliance, that at that time it was not rejected by Taliban. It was rejected by Afghan government under the influence of NATO forces and US. They were on one side saying that Pakistan should not provide safe havens to terrorists inside Pakistani territory. At the same time, they were following the same goal, that there should be no fencing on the ground.
Okay.
So obviously, that was conflicting goal, and
all
Pakistan
there was a conflicting goal, but of course things are kind of moving in the right direction. Taliban Minister Zabiullah Mujahid also on Sunday appreciated Pakistan for supporting Afghanistan internationally. So let's see how this whole gamut of relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan moves forward. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow. News stories, news segments. Take care of yourselves. Allah Hafiz.